Here's a few interesting facts that most Americans do not know at all. Did you know that the two oldest surviving communities in the United States were both founded by the Spaniards, by the Spanish? Yes, that's true. In 1595, St. Augustine, Florida was founded, and it is officially the oldest community in the United States of America, founded by European colonizers. Number two is Santa Fe, New Mexico, founded in 1610. The first English colony successfully founded was not in Plymouth. No, that's much later. Was founded in Jamestown, Virginia. And the date on that is 1607. I'll bet you didn't know that. Because 90% of Americans that were surveyed in a poll didn't get any of those correct. Which to me tells me so much about how little we know about American history. I'm Roy Arthur. This is Unbelievable Reality Podcast. Make sure you check me out, Roy Arthur P on Instagram and Roy Arthur on TikTok. But not for much longer, because the corruption at TikTok is seething into every pore, and soon the corpus shall die. I will not be there to witness its demise. Lengthy explanation, but true. I want to start mixing some American history into my podcasts. I am, ironically, as a high school graduate, I'm a student of American history. I've always been fascinated by the history of this great experiment, as well as the European history of North America as a whole, and how that European history collided with the indigenous history of North America. I can go into South America too, because I do have a bit of interest there and have read and am well read on some of the history, but South America is an entirely different animal. So we're going to stay focused geographically here on the United States of America, good old US of A, of which my family, this is another surprise, and you should look into your own family tree. Do not use any online service to map your family's genetics. That will be used against you in a court of law soon. So before I start every podcast, I like to start off with a book recommendation. Lately, I just seem to love self-flagellation. And so I continue diving deeper and deeper into surveillance capitalism. Shoshana Zuboff just gave an incredible lecture. I can't remember where it was. I think Stanford a week ago, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. Frightening, because this was written in 2018 now I've gone into your data will be used against you. And boy, howdy. Folks, we really need to get our heads around surveillance technology, and the merging of surveillance technology with the computational powers of artificial intelligence. Our most sensitive data is owned and controlled by private corporations. Throughout the history of almost every country in the world, the greatest fear was the government was watching you. Big Brother was the government. This is what Orwell talked about in 1984. Its Big Brother is the government. In our world, in this country, in 2026, it's not Big Brother. It's Google, Microsoft, Amazon, X, Instagram, TikTok, and most toxic of all, Palantir. We are being surveilled 24/7, 365, everywhere we go, even in our own homes. Our Ring security door systems are corrupted. Our televisions are watching us. The microphone in the television is also a camera, and it's looking back at you, and it's in every television made in the last decade. This is fact. You can look it up. Of all the things that keep me awake at night, this surveillance technology is the worst. It's the greatest fear. I'm not going to start playing conspiracy games. I'm not a prophet. I am a business owner for 3 decades. I've been in sales since I was 17. I'm the father of 5. I am an outdoorsman. I am an environmentalist. I give a fuck about our climate. I referred to a previous statement about being a father. I grew up in Oregon and lived most of my life in the mountains of Colorado, and that is my church. I practice no formal religion, nor will I ever, because it's hypocrisy and shit. If you want to believe in myths, you're better off reverting back to the Egyptian gods, the Greek gods, the Roman gods, or anything else prior to Christianity. You're going to get more money for your bang, more bang for your buck. At least it'll be fucking interesting. No, surveillance capitalism keeps me up more than anything else, because as this capitalistic experiment continues to collapse, the only thing left, as I've said in previous podcasts, there's two sources for capitalism to flourish: extraction and exploitation. Exploitation of the workforce, extraction of resources. There's not a lot of resources left to extract in the United States of America, except for the workers that have been exploited. And now through this surveillance capitalism, they're extracting what's left of us. Think subscription services for your television alone. Just think of that alone. I've spoken in previous posts on Instagram about the fact that starting in 2027, every new automobile sold in the United States of America must have biometric technology, surveillance technology, and a kill switch. Here's the bad news, folks. That's already been deployed, and as near as I can tell, based on the information available to me, has been in use for 7 years. The big 3 automakers have been selling your private driving information, how you drive your car, how quick you brake, whether you use your signals, everything, to LexisNexis and to the car insurance companies. And if you wonder why your rates just went through the roof, it's because they've been selling your data to the insurance company. Conflict of interest, to put it fucking lightly, but guess what? We don't have any laws against that. And that's what makes private surveillance so terrifying. We have no laws to protect us against this right now. And there is no national energy in our government to do anything about those laws, because there's too much money being spread around for anybody to have the backbone to step up and say, wait a minute, we need to do something about this. Every bill introduced to regulate AI so far has been destroyed by the Republican Congress and Senate. Period, the end. But it's not just them. The Democrats are in collusion as well. I would like to explore also the fact that our upper chambers of government are bought out by AIPAC, but that's a good way to disappear, and I don't want to go down that hole right now. More to be said about that later. Surveillance capitalism. Listen, if you aren't aware of this by now, then you're living under a rock, or you're just willfully ignorant. You don't want to know. Okay? You just don't want to know. You don't want to believe it. You don't want to deal with it. You don't want to look at it. Don't. Then be that 50% that says, what's the worst that can happen? You'll find out. For the rest of us, the only way that we can do anything about what is going on is to try to stop it from a grassroots level. Doing things like arson and just illegal acts is useless. It's pointless. It does us no good. So don't. Do not. Violence is not the answer. Period. The city of Flagstaff, Arizona, switching gears, recently showed us how we can do something on a local level to stop this, or at least slow it down. What they did is they went to the city council, the citizens of the city, and they said, we want flock cameras out of our city now. Flock cameras, or Flock, the company, is owned in part by Peter Thiel, who is the founder and owner of Palantir. If you don't know who Palantir is, you're just, I don't even know how to, I don't know that you're someone we can help. If you're that ignorant to what's going on, then just move on through this podcast and you'll find something else to watch, like Scooby-Doo. For everybody else that does know, that's a problem. That's a warning bell. That's every form of bad there is. Flagstaff successfully went to the city council, got the chief of police and the local sheriff both on board saying this is a really bad fucking idea for one reason. Those cameras are so easy to hack that literally a fourth grader with an iPad can do it. You can hack those cameras with your cell phone, and they have been and they are, by pedophiles, by abusive ex-husbands, ex-lovers, ex-boyfriends, ex-girlfriends, ex-anything. That's the vulnerability. That's the vulnerability you exploit in your community, is the fact that the technology is weak as shit. It was deployed too early, it's weak as shit. You can force your city council to cancel the contract. This is a contract that you, as a member of the community, are paying for. We, as members of the community, have the right to say, wait a minute, we don't want this shit, and get rid of it, cancel the contract. That's what we can do now, today, to do something about this. In addition, try to spend as little time online. Irony of ironies, here I am creating online. I know, I get that. That's like the pot calling the kettle black. It's an oxymoron and it's counterintuitive. I understand. But for some of us, social media is the only way to get this message out, so what the fuck are we gonna do? We're certainly not gonna make the nightly news. I don't want to. There's only one way to do that. Skipping along. That's what you can do. Never, ever, 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 ever post photos of your children online, ever, period, the end. Never do it. And watch how much screen time your kids get. That's what you can do right now, today, to slow down surveillance technology. Other issues in regards to the car issue, in regards to all kinds of things, data centers, etc. We're going to cover a little bit of that right now, but today, surveillance capitalism is out of control, folks. It's out of control. They have cameras in the price tags at the grocery store that raise and lower the prices depending on you and what they know about you, your buying habits, and how much fucking money you have. Deduced by the clothes you're wearing and the look on your face. You okay with that? Take a few minutes. I am not. So, I brought a prop to class today. I love to bring props to class today. Today's show and tell. This right here is one of my most prized possessions. And I have some pretty prized possessions, so to put this one at the top is pretty interesting. And I'm going to use this today for historical reference, so we can start educating the stupid and the slow, and just fact, the truth be known, American history isn't really that interesting to a lot of people. Which baffles me, but it's true. So I'm going to try to help out the folks that have never had time to actually understand how we got to where we are today. In my hands is a Union soldier cavalry officer. Cavalry was horseback during the Civil War. This is an original officer's sword from the Civil War from 1863. It has been authenticated. It has been traced back through the serial number. It was made by Hoffman and Sons, lovely company out of Philadelphia. They made a whole bunch of these because as an officer, you had to have a sword. And in all of the paintings and everything you see of the charge of the 7th Cavalry, of Custer. Every time you see Custer, he's got one of these in his hand. I find this so fascinating because this was held during war by a Union officer in 1863. How many hands has this touched? What has this sword seen? What stories could it tell? There's a dent, a very significant dent in the brass pommel here that is in a perfect place if you were striking down to hit something very hard right there. Hard enough to leave a dent. Or say, for instance, it was in your hand and you fell off your horse like that, as you're wont to do, catching yourself with your hand, and you catch your sword first because you forget to let go. Which would mean that the owner of this is most likely a casualty of the Civil War. A war where 100,000 men were killed or wounded in a single day at the Battle of Gettysburg. Bet you didn't know that either. A war where one of the most significant battles, with very few casualties, only 357, was fought at Raton Pass in New Mexico and stopped the Confederacy from being able to expand into Texas. Had they done such and opened up another front in the war, the Union might not have been successful, and ultimately, who knows? There's a lot of lessons from the Civil War that we need to discuss as we approach our 250th anniversary of this grand experiment. But I think it's relevant because the legacy of the Civil War that so many people think is over, that so many people just assume the North won, which they did. The Confederacy was defeated, which it was. Slavery was abolished, kind of. And the South will never rise again. Wrong. Wrong. To this very day, the aftershocks from the Civil War still reside and resound and echo throughout this country, north to south, east to west, in ways that we've just become accustomed to and really nobody ever explained to us. That's part of my purpose here. My wife calls me the professor occasionally, mostly when she's pissed. Here's some thoughts. The United States, the Revolutionary War formally ended in 1783. We're going to celebrate our quote-unquote anniversary from July 4th of 1776. So, number one, most people do not realize the Revolutionary War lasted for 7 years. That is an incredibly long time. And it's something that we are really not taught. Why does that matter? It matters because the truth is the country at that time was almost evenly divided. Sound familiar? Between revolutionaries and Tories, otherwise known as people who supported the English crown and did not want to not be part of the English, who did not want to be an individual country called the United States of America. At that time, do remember, there were only 13 colonies. 13 colonies scattered tenuously along the eastern seaboard. The rest of the United States of America was completely undiscovered at that point. We really had nothing, we had no idea what lay to the west, beyond maybe say 500-700 miles. There's actually more on that story too, because we actually did know what was out there, but regardless, that was all that existed of the United States of America today. Less than 1/100th of the actual landmass of the country that we live in today. That's pretty startling if you think about it. It wasn't a very big place, but big enough. The English ultimately lost the war, not because they didn't have support, not because the revolutionaries' ideas were better. Really, the English lost the war because they couldn't keep financing it and keep supplying it. It took a month plus to get a boatload of soldiers from London to Virginia. And along the way, about 30% of them got sick or died. So it was really hard to continue to fight the war because you couldn't get troops on the ground. Plus, you couldn't get supplies for the troops, bullets, cannons, food, clothing, uniforms, name it. What ultimately led to the British finally saying enough is the fact that they just simply could not afford to fight the war any longer. They did a cost-value assessment and they said, fuck it, we'll focus on India. That was so cruel, but also really, really true. We'll talk about the Dutch East India Company at a later date. But here's something I think is really fascinating. The Revolutionary War ended in 1783. In 1861, at Fort Sumter in South Carolina, the first shots of the Civil War were fired. Think about that for a little bit. Think about that. In 80 years, the Republic, the grand experiment, was failing to the point where the only way they could resolve their differences was through war. This has been boiled down to the industrial North versus the slave-holding agricultural South, which in a lot of ways it was. But it really was a power struggle for the elites. The war was fought by the white lower trash of the country, the poor, the immigrants. People would get off the boat from Ireland and immediately be signed up to go into the army, never even finding a place to live, and they'd be fighting for the Union or for the South, depending on where your boat landed. This was a war for the elites, fought over financial control of the future of the United States, wrapped up in the flag of governance. States' rights versus federal rights is something you hear an awful lot about the Civil War. The Civil War was about slavery, period, fucking the end. Because slavery was money. And abolishing slavery wiped out the wealth of the aristocracy in the South. They went to war to protect their wealth. Period, the end. It wasn't about how much right states would have. No. It wasn't about federal oversight. No. This is mythology that's been taught into the system of our educations by the South, by the losers of the Civil War, to take the light off the fact that it was entirely about slavery, and ultimately slavery was entirely about money. And if you put that in perspective to the world we live in today, the fact that we are in a war in Iran that no one wants except for a small group because they want the money and the control. In our world today, if you really distill it down, our God is money. It's a false God, regardless of the religion you choose to practice if you do. I don't, but I'm smart enough to realize money makes the fucking world go round because we've given it that much power. We worship the wealthy, we envy them, we wish to emulate them, we dress like them, we talk like them, we want to drive their cars. That is our new God, and it's inescapable. And it's the God of the world, so don't feel like we're alone. We're not. Everybody else is the same. So, I want to start talking in my podcast more about how the history of the United States is really reflected in the society that we live in today. It's really no different. The Revolutionary War wasn't fought for quote-unquote independence from a tyrannical king. Another myth conveniently taught to make it simple. What really started the Revolutionary War, to be truthful, and you can do your research on this, I wish more people would, was land and money. The British made a treaty with the independent Indian nations that said they would not cross the Appalachian Mountains. They wouldn't go west. They'd not go over the mountains to the west, to Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, the Ohio River Valley. They made a deal. And that deal drove the rich Americans mad. George Washington being number one amongst them. At the conclusion of the Revolutionary War, George Washington was the richest man in the United States of America. And I'll bet you didn't know that. And before he became the president, he who can tell no lies with his wooden false teeth, he was a land surveyor. And he was one of the first whites to cross the mountains and see what was on the other side. Sit with that for a little bit. Anyway, the surveillance capitalism that we're dealing with today needs to be addressed immediately. The fastest way to do it is on a local level right now. So, start talking to people in your community, see what you can do about it, because we have an obligation, if nothing else. That obligation is to our children. I, as a father, feel the weight of that responsibility every day. If you're a parent, I hope you feel the same way. I'm Roy Arthur. This is Unbelievable Reality Podcast. As I always say, if you don't like what I'm saying, then don't fucking watch. If you do, like, comment, support, subscribe. Check me out on Patreon, Spotify, also Roy Arthur P Instagram, and Roy Arthur on TikTok. I'll talk to you soon.